Hi, thank you everybody for being here today. I'm really honored to have Robert here once again to give us a great tour of the exhibit and talk about particular pieces of the show and sculptures and different elements that really help bring and capture his work for this exhibition. So thank you all for being here and for the tremendous response that we received and support for Robert. So anyways, Robert's gonna take the wheel and go from here. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Paul's a curator and that was a great introduction. Hard to keep a straight face. I'll do it. The important thing is I want to thank all you people for coming here. Some of you come quite a distance. There's a lot to talk about here, but I'll try to simplify it. If you were a member and you came here and this was just another show and you walked around and you looked at it and you had different thoughts and you thought, well, you know, this stuff's like really interesting. I like looking at it, but personally, I wouldn't have it in my house. Well, that's a good objective way to look at it. This wasn't meant to be interior decorating. If you just took what I just said, the simplicity of what I just said, you look at it, you like it, you can go home and tell some friends, but you're glad you ain't stuck with it on your wall. That would sum it up. You know, we could just stop right here. But there's more snakes in the garden. A long time ago, right before the Second World War, Nelson Rockefeller was having trouble with artists that he hired, Diego Rivera, to do a mural in his building. Realistic artwork still had a good hold in 1939. Well, Diego Rivera, in this big mural, slipped in a picture of Lenin in this capitalist building. So after the World War, the government was concerned about leftists and communists and whatnot. Nelson Rockefeller, with his mother that owned the Museum of Modern Art, also possibly in conjunction with the top curator in the United States, the museum writer, critic, Clement Greenberg, started really pushing abstract expressionism. Now let me stop right here. I'm up for any kind of art. I don't believe in any bad art. If you find art that's bad, that's because you haven't accepted it as a subjective way of thought, see? So there's no bad art. That's like criticizing art. It's like stepping out there and cussing at the cloud formations, see? So I'm very open-minded. You don't have to be. But the point I'm making is that abstract expressionism was backed by the CIA after the Second World War, and its job was to push out realistic social artwork that leaned to the left. So after 1946-47, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, as the capital of the art world, took upon itself abstract expressionism as an absolute. Well, I don't know if any of you have noticed, even going back 2 generations, you go to the museum, you are not going to see representational art. Clement Greenberg pointed out that people that needed to see something three-dimensionally were kind of morons, that they didn't advance into progressive thinking of the two-dimensional world. Now, there's something to be said about that to a certain extent, but that got rid of all the realists. So after the Korean War, you just did not see realism in museums. Okay, when young man, I come to art school, my head was full of these wild ideas of my B-movies and comic books and hot rods and all these incredible visions. Well, that got stopped because I was in the world of abstract expressionism. And all my many art friends referred to me as the illustrator. Well, okay, there was another snake in the garden. About 1953, 1954, there was a book that came out called The Seduction of the Innocent. Now, when I was a young kid, I loved comic books. And I loved ones that were gaudy and lurid and really rich to look at. Well, this book, Seduction of the Innocent, was about lurid comics creating juvenile delinquency. So this book created a Senate investigation and hearing And in 1954, they killed all the good comic books. Now, the company that did the best comics was called Entertainment Comics, EC, and they had a comic called Mad. Well, when they had to quit doing comics, they took Mad into magazine form, and I'm sure you all know Mad magazine. That was all that was left of the great EC comics. Now, I'm in a world where I want to be a rich creator. Can't do that. My friend said, you're an illustrator. Well, I don't want to be an illustrator. I want front row in the arts. What you're looking at is art that has violated that code. Now, years I couldn't get gallery shows. I could sell paintings to wealthy people. No gallery shows, no write-ups, no publications. Something happened in the art world that was an anomaly. About 1979, 1980, a music trend came called punk rock. And man, it had no goddamn rules. And I realized that I could slip in as an artist. There were after-hour clubs for punk rockers that had been to the concerts, and then after that's over, they went to these after-hour clubs that were really excuses to sell alcohol without a license. Well, the work on it was lurid and crazy. And the crowds that went there would steal the art and cut the art and urinate on the art, but it was wild. This was a real violation in traditional art, and I fit perfectly. All I had to do was make the work have enormous amounts of energy. So things started really picking up for me, and other artists started doing it too. So it created kind of an underground school of art. Okay, let me give you a little sidebar. During the Vietnam War, there started being psychedelic rock posters in San Francisco. See? Now, I think you maybe have seen them. They were done back in the mid-'60s. And if you look at them, you couldn't read them. And the reason you couldn't read them was your ass wasn't meant to read them, because you had to be hip enough to figure them out. Because it was underground outlaw graphics. Well, that got known all over the United States, into Europe. Then the next thing that evolved out of that was underground comics with the help of Robert Crumb and a number of Zap artists, me included, see. Our philosophy was, you think those old comics were terrible, you ain't seen nothing. So that's why I'm standing here before you, is because I've got these paintings that are crazy, you know. These are in violation of the domestic codes of our academia at LA County Art Museum, and especially MoMA in New York. So, well, you say, well, what about graffiti? Well, graffiti did slip in there, and it did have a place in the underground, but it didn't have that language. It did not have narrative, see? You say to yourself, well, what about pop art? Well, yeah, pop art's realistic stuff, but it doesn't have a narrative. It can't talk to you. You're looking at Campbell Soup there, or Elvis Presley. It ain't telling you nothing. But I got narrative here, see? And so do the many, many artists with me that has done this. Now, in 1994, there was enough of us that we started a magazine called Juxtapose. And within a 20-year period, Juxtapose became the top-selling art magazine in the world, see? So this stuff does not go unnoticed. You're standing in a problem here for the academic art world. Probably the best thing for me to do is field questions. I can tell you, I got to watch my watch here so I don't talk to I grow hair on my tonsils. These are oil paintings, and each one's got a little story, and it's just like looking at a comic book. The paintings here are done in a calligraphy like a comic book, and this is to show the virtuosities of a drawn line, see? They're done on very inexpensive canvas, so I don't spend too much time on them. They're just done fast. On the contrary, These paintings are done on the finest linen money can buy with the finest paints that can be used, because I'm going to spend a lot of goddamn time on these things. Right? Going to art school, I become extremely versed on technique. So it just come off like duck off water off a duck's back for me to do these technical paintings. See? Each painting like this took a long, long time. And it's 3 complete coats, very thinly done over a fine drawing. See? You go, well, how do you make a living? I make a good living off these things. So you think things are looking good. I guess the best thing for me to do right now is, instead of going off on a long thing, is to start fielding questions, because I'm a little more malleable when you ask a question. So just hold your hand up, we'll take you one at a time. Yes?
I love your summaries, the descriptions of the paintings.
Thank you.
They are amazing, and I took time to read almost every single one in here.
Bless your heart.
Do you have a favorite one of these summaries that you have written?
Well, these are all my children, but I have one downfall, and that's I get in a lot of trouble with feminists. See? Well, this one painting, if you'll read about this one painting, if you read this one, this explains my weakness of dealing with a female figure, see? But I always, as staunch and conservative as I want to be, I always regress back to the female form, because the female form is the origin of beauty. It's just the whole concept that something can be pretty, even if it's a landscape or a skyscape or something, it always starts basically with the female form. Did I answer your question? Yes.
Can you talk about the sculptures?
Paintings I can do in my house, and they cost me a little. Sculptures cost an enormous amount of money. So I was gifted by some underwriters that would put the money up for sculptures. I learned sculpture in art classes back in the 60s, and I always relished sculpture, just couldn't afford it. But that's solid money. So I did 5 different sculptures. The other one is in the front room, the stamp collector. The thing about sculptures is you can walk all the way around them, but the negative thing about sculptures is they don't have an environment, see? But the trade-off is that to have a three-dimensional quality like we do. The particular one you're looking at now was created in honor of a very old term, a very redneck colloquialism called the diamond in a goat's ass. And that's referring to something that's a little too fancy. You say, well, man, that's a diamond in a goat's ass. Well, that's what you're looking at now. That's taking it to its height. Now, there's one of those in Moscow. There's one of those in Switzerland. I think this is the 4th one. The others I don't have here to tell you about them, but the stamp collector, when you do something 10 or 12 feet tall, you got to be prudent about the subject matter. You know, you can't do something questionable. So I got a square guy, it's a stamp collector, so you can see what a real nerdy dork would look like at that colossal size, like the colossal roads, like the Colossus of Rhodes, like a dork. That come out of a painting. Now, these other sculptures were drawn to be sculptures, but that one's an exception. It come out of my book. It was a painting, and it was lurid. The nicest thing about it was a stamp collector. I don't even know if I should tell you about this. I know you're itching. You want to hear this. Well, the painting had the stamp collector sitting on his stool, and emanating out of his head was about 3 or 4 different fixations of himself. And his sexual repression was relieved by stamp collecting. So one of these heads comes out and goes down, and there's a nude woman laying on her back on a trap, and she's laying on the trigger. This is going to be a brain trap. And his tongue goes all the way down, and she's got a whole line of stamps over her mouth, and he's licking them stamps. Now, that scene was shown in Miami. That sculpture premiered in Miami Basel, and they had the big blow up of the painting. So there was no kidding what was going on. So that stamp collector had a significance. It had a real ironic situation about it. Is there anything else I can? Yes.
You just mentioned repression, and I feel like in so much of your work, you're unearthing the real deeper, thoughts. And I see that in so much of your work, and I was just really curious to hear you talk about that.
Well, I'm just letting the door open a little bit on these. But if you look at underground comic books, you'll realize that all the stops have been pulled. See, I don't want to use the word dirty because I think they're poetic, but the roughest material you could come up with in humankind is in those underground comics. And it's taken to an abstract form that this is so filthy, it's poetic. You got a real problem if you're sexually charged with this stuff. See, this is slipped over into abstract thinking. See, so all I could advise you on that point is to look up underground comics and see some of the more gnarly ones, and you'll have a revelation. Come on, you guys got a question?
I got a question.
Sure.
So, where do the ideas come from, and how do you keep them? Like, I read a book by Dali. He said that his technique was to fall asleep with a pair of keys and on the edge of his bed, and as soon as he slept, the keys would fall on a plate, and then whatever he saw, he would paint. And that was like how he just was able.
Do you believe that? I sit down with a pencil and a piece of paper for days and weeks, excreting these ideas, and redoing them and redoing them and redoing. Imagination is a very important thing to me. And let me tell you a couple of tricks. Make a list of 20 things that you think are wonderful. Ice cream and this girl's dress and certain birds. Just write a bunch of real sweet stuff. Then on the other side of the page, write all the stuff that disgusts you. Then take you got about 1,000 variations there to pull all that together, and you can tell a story if you got any imagination at all. It's just swapping stuff back and forth, see? I mean, it takes conscious effort to come up with imagination. Now, I could tell you, I'm a crazy guy. These are demons I'm fighting. But no, I have to sit down and work them out and say, well, number one, never copy anybody. Number two, never copy a photograph. And number three, make sure it's got real rich imagination that will hold people's attention. So that's about all I can tell you about that. You can read all the I read every damn thing Dolly ever wrote. Is there any other questions?
Well, let's move to the next one.
We're in now another environment, and I guess this is the premier hall because it's got the biggest work. When you do a small painting, that's okay. And you do a bigger one, you'd better sell it. But when you do a real big one, that's too big to eat. So on a small painting, I could come up with kind of a little goofy idea. On a medium one, I got to spend some time. On the big ones, my head's on the chopping block. I got to come up with something, it's going to pay for itself. It's going to have some strength to it. It's going to be worthy of being 6 or 7 feet tall. Another oddity or anomaly in my work is I've slipped back into time on frames. You go to a museum, you ain't going to be seeing no frames. If it's modern, it ain't going to have no frames. Not only do I frame the work to give it a separation from the wall and a formal look, but if you look on some of these paintings, I don't think there's one in this room, some of them, they're not stapled to the stretcher bars, they're tacked like they used to be a long time ago. It's almost impossible to find an artist who uses tack stretches canvases anymore. They just go blam, 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 blam with a staple gun, see? Well, I'll leave about 2 inches long material behind it so I can pull those tacks out and tighten that canvas up. Or long after I'm dead, someone will say, look, this guy was nice enough to leave this little hair to pull on, you know. See, that's my fetish. I was very fortunate enough when I was a young man. I was hungry, and me and my wife were just married, and I was losing one job after another. And I got a job with a guy named Ed Big Daddy Roth. I was a hot rodder. I was a hot rodder. 12 years old, I was a hot rodder. But I didn't want to. I wanted out of that world. I wanted to be sophisticated. I wanted to be, get rid of all these people that used to steal car parts and whatnot. Be above that. But after I lost job after job and whatnot, and I went down to the unemployment agency, and they say, no, we don't have any job for you. Well, wait a minute, we got a job, but it's filthy, nobody would take it. I said, what is it? They're looking for an art director with this guy named Ed Big Daddy Roth. I said, well, give me the phone. So all of a sudden, my fortune changed. Me and Suzanne were making a lot of money, see. But one thing that I picked up from that, well, working at Roth Studios, they demanded a wild imagination. And I just come up with the wildest stuff, and they say, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. Yeah, that's crazy enough, use that and that. But one thing I did pick up on is the technique of metal surfaces. How do you paint chrome? I got it, see? If you look at this metalwork here, that's slick, see? That's Art Center slick, man. I know metal and chrome, see, because there was a fellow working at Ross that did his auto design. It was well known in Art Center, he could really chrome. And I gave him a Donald Duck comic book, and I says, chrome a couple of pages in here. And he'd do Donald Duck in chrome and everything in chrome. And I picked up the technique to handle a beautiful shine on any surface. Understanding what chrome was, I understood that if you do something chrome, it's not responsible to light direction because it's picked up every light around it. So I realized, well, this is chrome is like another world, totally reflected surfaces, like another world. So I started, when I was working in Zap Comics, I started chroming everything, cartoon characters and everything, see? And this put me in good with my psychedelic poster artist friends. Two of the artists in Zap Comics were well-known, famous poster artists. Rick Griffin and Victor Moscoso were part of the big five of the top psychedelic poster artists that existed. And they're my buddies, and so they saw that crazy chrome, and they realized, well, I had a psychedelic world in my hands. So anyway, the frames formalize the stuff. You could say, well, I wouldn't have it in my house, and it's a little questionable. And if I had guests over, I don't know what they're going to think, and I don't want the children seeing this. But you got that expensive gilt frame on there. It isn't a matter, is this suited for your house? Abstract expressionism is the most beautiful form of interior decorating. It looks good in hospital lobbies. It looks good in bank lobbies. You can't beat it. You cannot beat abstract expressionism because you don't look at it. You sense it with a visual feeling, an ambiance. And you go in the bank building, it's a big abstract thing. You don't walk over and stare at it. It's got that ambiance. It makes you feel good because it's integrated into the interior decorating and the architecture. See, these things will destroy your living room. I will quote Salvador Dali on one thing. He says a painting should be so good that it requires its own viewing chapel. Enormous expense went into the frames, and that's unfortunate that young up-and-coming artists can't get in that class, but that's the situation it is. Now I'm going to have to ask for some questions. You got any questions? Yes.
You talked about the influence of Basil Wolverton on underground artists in your work.
Well, there was an EC. All underground artists were poisoned by EC comic books, Now, one of the premier underground cartoonists is a fellow named Basil Wolverton that did these real biomorphic monsters and stuff that just sickened parents and whatnot. I think it'd be worth your time if y'all looked up Basil Wolverton on your iPhone. I did want to mention one thing. We have a guest here, George DiCaprio, that used to distribute underground comics. He's a very famous guy, not just his son, but the fact that he was distributing underground comics. And I would mention that over the span of underground comics, 400 people went to jail for dealing in underground comics. So is there any questions? Yes.
I imagine you'd have some pretty interesting theories or thoughts on censorship. Can you, even your descriptions of, your paintings might ruin a living room wall, can you extrapolate that into where you see censorship fitting into art?
Well, yeah, I understand it, and we're going to be facing that again. They're talking about going back to checking comic books out again and restricting comic books. I don't think that there is I'm a capitalist. I'm not a communist, but I run around with a lot of lefties, see. So I live in a free world. But politically speaking, I'll tolerate a lot of things up to a point. I don't think anything should be censored. I think there should be some consideration for little children. I understand that. But after you get to be 18, you should be subjected to just about everything everyone is. And if you don't like it, you just turn your head. See? Yeah. Censorship is... There's a painting in this other room of Anthony Comstock. I don't know if you might want to look at it. It's a 19th century fat guy named Anthony Comstock. And he's the one that started censorship in America. He was in charge of the Postal Department. And he was very proud to brag that he put 40,000 people in prison and caused 15 suicides. So that's my comment on that clown. See, you can go look at that painting and you see what I think of him. See, is there any other questions?
Your knowledge of history and it really comes through with these paintings.
Well, not only am I well versed in history, I'm pedantic. I use words that are too big to understand on purpose. And I do that for a reason. I studied art history because I'm blue in the face, and I've learned good vocabulary to back it up. And the reason for that is because when I go to a formal museum or I talk to a curator or something, he ain't going to overtalk me. He ain't going to shame me, see? I might be I'm a lowbrow artist. I'm the lowest phylum, but I can hold my own.
Not only art history in general.
Yeah, that got in there too. Is there another question?
I have a question about your paint. Earlier you said that you had 5 layers on top.
There is at least 3 layers of paint, maybe 5 or 6. Flesh takes 5 or 6 layers.
So I noticed this one over here, I was talking to my friend Victor, and he said that they use the master's techniques of adding like an orange base and then painting on top of that.
No, there's a whole bunch of different forms like that. So some people use gray, some people use a tint. I use white because I'll get it so dirty it'll be gray when I'm through with it.
Oh, okay. And as for on this painting specifically back here where the dirt is, I noticed that you have like an orange underneath.
Yes. If you look, while you're here, look at the backgrounds and the grounds real close, and you'll notice under the paint, there's 3 different colors. There'll be a red, an ochre yellow, and either blue or a green on almost all these paintings, see, which takes an enormous amount of time. See.
And as for when you add the base layer and when you start adding the top coats on, do you still add the base color layer mixed in with the overcoat?
No. The paint is put on extremely thin, one coat on top of the other.
That's why it takes multiple layers to get that.
Yeah, it's chronic. It's really chronic. Yes?
Yeah, kind of the same question, but I've seen in your books that some of the underpaintings have like a blue and red pattern to it.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anybody else do that. Is that you?
Well, almost all masters did it on flesh. It was a trick they used on flesh to make it have a waxy depth. But I do it on dirt and skies and everything. There's a richness to it. See. Was there anything else? Yes?
So when it comes to art creation or output, do you like titrate it like an hourly amount of hours per week, or when you just have inspiration, you go like day and night, or how do you do that?
When I was young, in my 30s and 40s, I worked about 10 or 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I was turning out 30 paintings every 18 months and having a sold-out show. I had 8 sold-out shows in a row. I was a painting machine, and my poor wife had to take care of me like I was a baby. And she said, this is ending. There will be no more of this. So I started slowing down and just taking time, and so. Yes?
Just one last one. This might be too hard to answer. You've done a prolific amount of work, but if somebody were to ask you to choose a painting that best represents you, that is quintessentially you, would there be one?
I couldn't do that because they're all my children. I get so emotionally involved in this goddamn painting. It's a reflection of me and what I'm worth. And I did my best, then I finally quit, and I said, oh, God. Now, stay away from it a couple of months. I go, man, that's bitching.
That's a wonderful answer.
I come back to it after I got away from it, then I can see it. Yes?
Well, why is that? Because I noticed that. I'm a painter, and so I'll look at something, I'm dissatisfied with it when I'm doing it, and I'll walk away and come back later, and I'll feel.
It's a real false, a cheap vanity. It's a reflection of myself, Like, well, what will they think? What will they think? These walls are full of neuroses, not just in the figures, but in the execution of them. I would never advise anyone to do this. I'm not one of these people that see young people that got talent and say, you should be an artist. Don't be an artist. Don't be an artist. It's terribly hard. The art schools are turning out legions of young artists, legions of them. Most of them are conceptualists or abstract expressionists or minimalists. They have no practical use to themselves, except to the fact that they got a grant or something and some form of success. If you're a young artist and you've put in 4 or 5 years and you really suffered, then you got me, But I'm not an advisor. I don't advise nobody nothing on this. Was there any more?
I got a question for you. How much in your process do you collect or try to remember your dreams and try to weave those into your paintings? And if so, are there strange imagery that you're like, I don't know what the heck this is about, but it came from my dream world? As like a surrealist, using your dreams.
Dreams ain't got a damn thing to do with it. Dreams or drugs or it's sit down with a bunch of ideas and try to weave them together. It's very rational, an objective way to sit down and make something subjective. See? Like the guy says, don't pick up the snake. That's objective. But if the guy picks up the snake 7 times and gets bit 7 times and he gets where he can pick up the snake, that's subjective. You understand? I don't. Because it's subjective. So artists function in an objective world and they give the public a subjective world. Beautiful music is subjective. Art's subjective. It's a gift we have. It's a gift we can give to others. It's a subjective world. I guess pardon?
Yeah, you came up with Rick Griffin and the Big Five. They're psychedelic artists largely.
We took a lot of acid together. Yeah, we were psychedelic rangers.
Are you still doing it?
Oh no, I'm an old man. No. I stay away from coffee and stuff. I'm old, 83. That's way back in my distant past.
Do you still feel the influence of it?
Well, you can't endorse drugs to people because you don't know what people are going to do. But if I had it to do over again, I sure as hell would do it again. Of Because I know what I was like. I knew whatever I do in life, I'm responsible for myself and the people around me, see? I never lose that thought. But other people aren't like that. I've seen people get on acid and have motorcycle wrecks and stuff, and it's just some bad judgments. I guess that's, is there any more questions? We can go on the other, okay, yes?
When did you realize you had your talent? What age?
I started drawing before I could write my name. Like 3 or 4, I could start drawing. So they said, always come to. It was a place I could escape through. But when I grew up to be a man, I had to do things. I worked on a ranch and herded cattle. I baled hay. I was a dishwasher. I was a short order cook. I was a soda jerk. I was a forklift operator. I was a truck driver. And all of these left the impression on me that I'd better get out of this. You know, let's work on that art. That art might be the way out of this. Okay, I guess we can go in the other room now, don't you? Last room, so I'll try to put the cherry on top for you. The painting on this wall down at the end is a historical painting, and it's the namesake of California. Now, if you look in your iPhone and say, well, where'd the name come from? They'll tell you it came from Queen Califia and some stuff, and where that name come from and whatnot. When the conquistadors came up the Pacific coast, the cartologists, the map makers, way ahead of them, had made California into an island. They thought you could just go up Baja Peninsula and it'd bring you back to the Pacific. In the 1500s, there was a famous novel written in Spain. I can't remember the guy's name, the information's on the thing there. Famous Spanish writer, and he wrote about a historical event. Now, sidebar, in 1453, the Christian world lost Constantinople. So they figured, you know, that had an enormous effect on the economics in all of Europe, losing Constantinople. It didn't mean anything to us, you know. We were just becoming a nation, and I don't know how much it affected England at all. But in the countries in the Mediterranean, the loss of Constantinople was an enormous drama. Not only did they lose the premier last stronghold of the Greek Orthodox Church, but they lost the ability just to market off the Far East. So this guy wrote a story about that struggle. The people that had Constantinople, they just got their fannies whipped. They just got beat, easy. But the people in Europe didn't want to think of it that way because they sent a lot of troops to defend it and whatnot. So this writer wrote this fantasy story about the Christians having to deal with the Muslims. Now, a big selection of the Muslims were Mamelukes, blacks. See? In fact, the Mamelukes really did a lot of the work for well, I don't want to go into what their successes were. But anyway, this story was about the Christian fighters were fighting these Mamelukes, and one section of them come from an island. That was an island run by this Amazon queen that was a lesbian cannibal. And she would take males that she captured, and she would feed them to the griffins, or they would eat them, and then turn have sex with them, and then dispose of them. Some order. So this was the thrust of the story the conquistadors were reading. Now, in the story, somehow they catch Califia and convert her to Christianity, and that's the end of the story. So, happily ever after. But the conquistadors had this story in their head, and they get to California, and they run across the Yaqui Indians, and they found out there was an Amazon tribe of Yaqui Indians there, and so They transposed that story and validated the fact that there's going to be a Queen Califia, and that's how the name California come by. Now, Queen Califia was African American, but since this had such a heavy weight by the Latino community, Mesoamerican, I made it a Mesoamerican theme. So if you look at the very end painting, you'll see that Queen Califia is offering mercy to a conquistador. Every once in a while, I'll slip into actual history because I can juice it up. Right? I can, I can make it better than someone else could have already touched it up, This painting here, I had a show in Phoenix, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I was raised in Albuquerque, born in Albuquerque. And as a young man, I built adobe houses. So nobody was going to tell me how to build adobe houses, so I could paint this painting, see, how to make adobe and build adobe houses. My show was very successful in Santa Fe, but one fellow didn't like the realism and told me so. But I get that. There's someone that will always come up. I had a painting of a nude woman on a bacon and tomato sandwich, nude. And behind her was Jesus in drag. And a crowd of Christians come around me, and they sitting there, very polite Christian demure, asked me, how can you bring yourself to render our Savior like that? And I says, well, if Jesus was here today, I don't think he would think too kindly using him nailed to lumber as your logo. It's a naked man nailed to lumber. I don't think he's going to like that. So they just shut up and wandered off. What was it you wanted me to talk about?
The Medusa raft.
Okay. This is interesting art philosophy. You hear people say this all the time. Well, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. Now, that's as honest, as pure as an aesthetic judgment you'll ever have in your life. And that was my judgment as a young man. When I was a kid, I went through some books that my grandma had, some art books, and there was this picture of all these naked men on this raft struggling, and some of them were dead, and their genitals were showing, and it really disturbed me. It made me sick. Shut it. So a couple of years later, I've been come across it again, and I look at it, and I say, I don't know what kind of culture would accept a picture like that. Then I went to art school, and then I learned about what it was. It was a painting called Raft of the Medusa by an artist named Jericho. It's in the Louvre. So when I went to the Louvre, I saw this painting, and I realized this was the greatest goddamn painting ever made by human hands. The Raft of the Medusa tells a story of a ship that's going up the African coast, and they let this crazy guy negotiate it, and they run into a reef, so they're stuck, and they can't get the boat off. They're stuck there for months. So they're starting to eat each other and starve. So one of the adventurous bunch of people decided they start breaking wood off and make a raft. So they make this raft, and when everybody gets on it, it sinks in the water 5 feet. So they have to kill off a bunch of people to get the raft up. So then they go out into the ocean for months, and finally they see a ship. And that painting is when they see that ship. See? So if you want to look at something, it looks like a great comic book, a cover for a comic book, look at the Raft of the Medusa. See? I just wanted to point you out the philosophy of, well, I know what I like. You don't know what you like. You know what entertains you at the time. See? Was there any questions? Yeah?
Those be made into some kind of toys, the 3D.
These are not toys. These are serious. They're about as serious as I can make a thing. These were made they were my characters, and I sculpted them, and they were put to use by Gentle Giant, the fabrication house. Some of these were things out of my paintings. The one here that's kind of abstract is Tommy Tomato Horse Knife is that character. Tommy Tomato Horse Knife. I got that from an insane person that kept talking about he knew Tommy Tomato Horse Knife. So, I couldn't get that out of my mind.
You use Piss Pot Pete a lot in your paintings.
Well, okay, this other one, well, this is not for children. There was an old, still is, there's a very old rhyme. It's a barroom rhyme for lesser people than I'm sure our characters are. And the name of the rhyme was the rhyme of Piss Pot Pete. And it went on, and it was Piss Pot Pete with, pardon me, 40 pounds of dangling meat. So anyway, in the end, Piss Pot Pete sent to hell, and he tries to have coitus with the devil, and the devil can't even deal with him, and that's the end of the thing. But anyway, I wondered, well, I can do Piss Pot Pete. So if you look it up on your iPhone, of all the history and time on that thing, that's the image that you're gonna find, Piss Pot Pete, right there. Now, this character here is Coochie Cootie. Coochie Cootie is a character out of Zap Comics. He was originally designed to look like a 30s animated character. So he'd have that cartoon, that ultra cartoon characteristic. And his morals were not up to standard. And he could break his body apart and come in any kind of any figuration of his limbs and his torso and stuff. So he had that magic quality. He had a girlfriend that would not let him touch her. But she used him as an instrument to meet bikers and stuff. So his struggles in life is with this girlfriend is to watch how he is always staged and stooged. The term staged and stooged, set up and made a fool of all the time, see? So I don't think that's good for children either. But that was come out in 69, so it's been around a long, long time. Many, many comic books and whatnot. My time is about up, so I'm good for a bunch of questions if you want to let your hair down and say something, you know. Yes?
Was that the Coochie Cootie that the prisoner sent you?
Oh, yeah. I get a lot of crazy mail, and some guy in prison sent me a Coochie Cootie figure made out of toilet paper. And I prize that, you know. This is my audience here. So, is there any other questions? Any other thing? I'm going to put a halt. Yeah?
Speaking of Coochie Cootie, can you talk about his origin?
Well, I just did. It was in Zap Comics.
Oh, that just came from...
Zap Comics, yeah. 1969. Not for children. Okay. Do we have anything else? I guess I'm going to call a halt to it. Yeah?
What was it like going down to the Moai statues of Rick Griffin?
Pardon?
You guys went down to Rapa Nui, you and Rick Griffin? What was that like?
Me and Rick Griffin and my wife Suzanne and a couple other people on 2 occasions went to Easter Island. Like I always do, I always see the darker parts of things, you know. So I'm not going to get into that. Do we do what?
Take acid while you're...
No. We're too old by then.
Is there going to be a book of the new paintings?
There is going to be a book, but that'll be a while, yeah. That'll be my 14th book. Okay, well, I've had it, you know. Yeah. Thanks for coming down, George. I really appreciate it, you know.